My name is Lydia Cross. I was 25 years old the night my father's hand connected with my face so hard that the sound cracked through the dining room like breaking glass. The roast duck was still steaming on the table, the candles still flickering against the polished silver, and for a moment, no one moved. The sting burned across my cheek, but the silence burned deeper. My mother's fork trembled mid-air, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth as if staring at it hard enough could erase what just happened. My sister Claire smiled the smallest, coldest smile I had ever seen. My father, Richard Cross, exhaled through his nose like a bull. "You'll learn to listen," he said, his voice calm, practiced, dangerous. It wasn't the first time he'd raised his hand, but it was the first time he did it at dinner in front of the family, in front of the portrait of himself that hung above the fireplace as if even God had to watch him win. The smell of red wine and garlic filled my nose, thick and sweet, and suddenly, the food on the table looked like a still life of lies. "Dad," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I just said I was offered a contract. I wasn't bragging." "Bragging." He laughed without joy. "You're pretending again like you always do. Do you think anyone cares about your little design job? Your sister is arguing corporate cases in front of real people." Claire twirled her wine glass, red liquid swirling like blood. "He's right," she said softly. "Some of us actually work under pressure." My mother's voice was a breath. "Please, Richard, not tonight." He ignored her. His eyes pinned me. "You're not half the woman your sister is." The sentence landed heavier than the slap. The world tilted. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I saw my reflection in the silver dish cover my cheek, swollen eyes, wet, mouth open like I had forgotten how to breathe. I set my fork down slowly. "You're right," I said, barely a whisper. He leaned forward, smirking. "What did you say?" I met his eyes. My pulse steadied. "Then maybe she should start paying your bills." For a second, no one breathed. The words hung in the air sharp as glass, and then everything cracked. My mother gasped. Claire's smile vanished, and my father's face turned a shade I had never seen purple, then wettai. He slammed his fist on the table so hard the crystal rattled. "Watch your mouth," he roared. But I was already pushing my chair back, the wood scraping against the marble like a scream. The wine glass toppled, spilling red across the white linen, the color of war, the color of truth. I stood the sting on my cheek, fading into a cold clarity. "Dinner's over," I said. And I walked away, leaving them frozen in that perfect room of lies, the sound of my heels echoing through the house that I had been funding for years, without even knowing it. The slap was nothing new. What made it unbearable that night was the way everyone pretended it hadn't happened. I could still feel the heat pulsing under my skin as I drove back to my apartment, the city lights blurring through the windshield like broken promises. When I got home, I didn't cry. I just stood in the bathroom watching my reflection in the mirror, the shape of his hand still red across my face. It was almost poetic. The same man who taught me to stand tall had spent my whole life trying to make me small. My name is Lydia Cross, 25, interior designer, self-employed, self-funded, and apparently self-deluded for thinking family love came without a receipt. My father, Richard Cross, owns a small construction company that used to be big. He liked to tell people he built the city, though these days he can't even build his own credit. My mother, Evelyn, is the perfect accessory. Quiet, well-dressed, always apologizing for the mess he makes but never cleaning it. My sister Claire is the crown jewel attorney golden child, the one they show off like a trophy polished with my sacrifices. I grew up in the same house where the dinner took place. Marble floors, crystal lights, a grand piano. No one played, it looked perfect, but it smelled like fear. My earliest memory of my father is his voice echoing through the halls. "Don't slouch, Lydia. You look weak." I was 10. I straightened my back even when it hurt. By 16, I learned that his praise was a currency, and I could never afford enough of it. When I told him I wanted to study design, he laughed until his eyes watered. "Design? You mean decorating?" He said the word like it was dirt on his shoe. "You'll study finance or nothing." I chose nothing. I worked part-time, applied for scholarships, and got one. The day I got accepted to the Denver School of Arts, my mother said quietly, "Don't tell him yet." I told him anyway. He broke my phone that night. The next morning, he paid my tuition for the first semester. Control disguised as generosity, it was his favorite form of love. When I turned 19, he stopped paying. "You're grown," he said. "Let's see if your dreams can pay rent." So I worked. Days at a studio, nights waiting tables. I made it through, and somehow I still sent him money when he said the business was in a rough patch. It started with $200, then $5, then $1,500 a month just until the new project lands. It's been 3 years. The new project never landed. Every dollar I sent became another chain, another proof that I was still his daughter, still obedient. The more I gave, the less he respected me. Claire once told me, "You're too emotional, Lyd. Dad just wants you to be smart." But what she meant was, Dad wants you to be useful. I remember the day she won her first case. Dad took the day off work, Mom threw a dinner party, and I was the one who cooked. They toasted to her success while I scrubbed dishes. I thought it was fine. I thought that was love. But standing there that night with the bruise blooming on my face, I realized love shouldn't leave fingerprints. I had given them everything they wanted, silent service stability. In return, they gave me comparison and contempt. And yet part of me still hoped they'd see me. That's what makes it hurt the part of you that still wants their approval even after you know it's poison. That night, staring at my reflection, I whispered to myself, "Enough." It didn't sound like anger. It sounded like a promise. I didn't speak to my parents for a week after that dinner. It wasn't defiance. It was exhaustion. Silence had become my only form of safety. Every word I'd ever spoken in that house had been twisted into evidence against me as if my very voice was a threat. By the second day, the texts began. First, from my mother. "Your father didn't mean it. You know how he gets when he's under stress." Then from Claire. "You embarrassed him, Lydia. You should apologize." Apologize. The words sat in my stomach like rust. I stared at the message and thought about all the times I'd apologized just to keep the peace, when Dad yelled, when Mom cried, when Claire lied. My whole life had been one long apology for existing the wrong way. On the 4th day, my father's number flashed across my phone. I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice was calm, even kind. "Lydia," he said, "I've been thinking about what happened." "You were right." The words disarmed me. I froze. "Right. Yes," he continued. "You're independent now. You've made something of yourself. I'm proud of that. So, I need your help." And there it was, the twist of the knife. The company had a small setback, he said. Cash flow issues. The city delayed a payment, but it's temporary. "I just need you to cover one invoice short term. You'll get it back in 30 days. The sum, $15,000. I didn't even make that in a month. "Dad." "I don't make this harder than it is," he interrupted. "You said yourself you're grown now. You said Claire should start paying our bills, but she's busy, Lydia. She can't. You can. You owe us that much." I remember sitting there staring at my laptop, my design sketches scattered around like broken dreams. I had savings, not much, but enough for a future I hadn't built yet. My first thought wasn't even anger. It was shame. Shame for wanting to say no. I transferred the money. The confirmation email pinged seconds later, a quiet chain snapping shut. That's how it always started, a crisis wrapped in guilt followed by gratitude. "You saved us again, sweetheart," my mother texted that night. "Your father says he'll never forget this. He forgot the next week. A new request. Just the mortgage this time. Claire has a big case. We can't ask her." I paid again. And again. For 6 months I paid. Rent, utilities, car insurance, even the gardener who trimmed the hedges around the house I no longer lived in. Every payment came with the same script, Mom's trembling voice, Dad's solemn gratitude, and Claire's silence. I began to realize I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a wallet that said "I love you" before it opened. But there's a strange comfort in control, even when you're the one being controlled. Gaslighting doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it sounds like love. "We just need you, Lydia. You're the only one we can count on." The guilt kept me obedient. Until the night I came home from work to find an email forwarded from Claire's assistant. It was an RSVP list for a gala, a fundraiser for a local charity. Under platinum sponsors, my father's company name gleamed proudly. The same company I'd been bailing out, the same company he claimed couldn't pay the mortgage. My stomach turned cold. I scrolled further. There they were, a family photo, all smiles, holding champagne glasses. The caption, honoring Claire Cross for her contributions to family and community. My money had paid for that celebration. My silence had bought their image. And for the first time, the shame began to dissolve into something else, something sharper. I didn't know it yet, but that photo was the first piece of evidence in a case I was about to build, not for the court, but for the truth. The night it all snapped, Denver was quiet under a sheet of late winter rain. I came home from a client meeting, tired but hopeful. A small restaurant downtown had just hired me to redesign their interior. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I turned on the light and saw the red envelope on the floor, another letter from the bank. My name printed bold across the top, my father's handwriting scrawled underneath in blue ink. Handle this, will you? My stomach sank before I even opened it. The balance was negative, a joint business loan, one I never signed for now, delinquent for 60 days. My hands went cold. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and searched the account number. It was tied to my Social Security number. The signature on the document was mine, or a perfect imitation. My father had forged it. I scrolled through the online statements, each transaction screaming betrayal payments for a new truck hotel stays, dinners labeled client meetings. There were no clients. There was just Richard Cross and his hunger for control. The weight of it hit me like a second slap. $58,000 in debt, my debt. I felt my throat tighten, the air clawing out of me. All these years I had thought obedience would protect me. It had only armed him. I opened the old family group chat. The last message was a photo of Claire holding an award. Mom had written, "So proud of our girls." Our girls. I typed, "Did you sign a loan with my name on it?" and hit send. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then, my father's reply, "Watch your tone. You wouldn't even have a business if it weren't for me." A minute later, "If you ever accuse me again, you'll regret it." That was the moment something in me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it Project Truth. Inside, I began saving everything, every email, every screenshot, every text message. I took photos of the forged documents. I wrote dates, amounts, notes. Each file felt like a brick, and I was building a wall. A wall between me and them. The hours passed. At some point, I noticed my reflection in the dark computer screen, pale, hollow-eyed, but awake for the first time in years. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, shaking the windows. I whispered, "You can't hurt me anymore." I don't know who I was talking to, him or the part of me that still wanted to believe him. I pulled a red marker from the drawer and taped a sheet of paper to the wall above my desk. In big block letters, I wrote, "You owe me $58,000. I underlined it twice. The ink bled into the paper, spreading like a wound. Somewhere between anger and clarity, I began to laugh, not out of joy, but disbelief at how much I had given away just to be loved. I thought about that dinner, the slap, the silence, the wine soaking into white linen. I thought about how my mother looked away and how my sister smirked, and I realized they had all been part of the same lie. The next morning, I called my friend Mia, a financial analyst at the bank. When I told her everything, she went quiet. Then she said, "Lydia, this is fraud. If your name is on that loan without consent, he's in serious trouble." Serious trouble. The words felt like oxygen. She helped me pull the records. Every signature, every withdrawal, every date. We printed them out and laid them across her living room floor like a crime scene. She looked at me and said, "You have enough to bury him." I shook my head. "I don't want to bury him," I said quietly. "I just want to stop being his victim." But deep down, I already knew the only way to stop being one was to make him answer for what he'd done. When I went home that night, the red paper on the wall seemed to glow under the lamplight, a silent promise written in blood. 2 days after I uncovered the forged loan, I went back to the Cross estate. The house sat at the edge of the old neighborhood like a museum of denial, white columns, black shutters, and a door that had slammed on me more times than it had opened. My father greeted me in the foyer, his sleeves rolled up, his watch gleaming under the chandelier. "You came to apologize," he asked, his voice low, steady. I held up the envelope with the forged loan agreement. "You signed my name." His eyes didn't flinch. "I fixed our family's problem. Don't make it worse." "You stole from me," I said. My voice was trembling, but not from fear, from restraint. "You used my credit, my name, my life." He stepped closer. The faint smell of bourbon clung to him. "You wouldn't have anything without me. That business of yours who gave you your first client, who introduced you to the firm that pays your bills?" He jabbed a finger toward my chest. "You owe me." The word cracked something inside me. I took a breath, sharp and cold. "No," I said. "I don't owe you anything." He laughed, that cruel, condescending laugh I had heard my entire life. "You think you're independent, Lydia? You're a scared little girl playing grown-up, and when that fantasy of yours collapses, you'll come crawling back. You always do." My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, her hand gripping the banister. "Please, both of you stop." Her voice was small, brittle. "Not in front of the neighbors." I turned toward her. "You knew about the loan, didn't you?" She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. "He said it was temporary," she whispered. "He said you'd understand." "Understand." I repeated, my voice rising. "Understand that my own father committed fraud in my name, that you stood there and watched him do it." My sister Claire came out from the living room, phone in hand, perfectly composed. "You're being dramatic," she said. "Dad's trying to keep this family afloat. Maybe if you weren't so selfish, you'd see that." "Selfish." I laughed, a sharp sound that startled even me. "I've paid your mortgage for 3 years. I've covered your debts, your dinners, your image. You're drinking wine bought with my stolen credit." Claire's jaw tightened. "You're ruining everything. Do you have any idea what this could do to Dad's business?" "Good," I said. "Maybe it's time people see what's really behind the cross name." My father's hand moved faster than thought. I heard the crack before I felt it, another slap, harder this time, enough to send me stumbling back into the edge of the console table. A vase shattered. My mother gasped. Claire froze. Blood ran from my lip. He leaned over me, his face red, his voice a growl. "You don't talk about this family, ever." The taste of iron filled my mouth. I wiped the blood with the back of my hand and looked him dead in the eyes. "Then I'll let someone else talk about it." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I smiled, small, cold, certain. "The bank will love my story." I left the house without another word, my heartbeat echoing louder than the rain outside. That night, I sent every file from Project Truth to an encrypted cloud folder. Screenshot statements, forged signatures, even the gala receipts. For the first time, the fear didn't feel like a cage. It felt like fuel. I looked at the bruise forming on my cheek and whispered, "You made me weak to control me. Now I'm stronger because you tried." The next morning, I woke up to a new text from my father. "Come home and fix this, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message, smiled faintly, and deleted it. The game was over. The reckoning had begun. The following week, my apartment turned into an evidence lab. Every surface was covered in papers, bank statements, printed emails, loan contracts, screenshots, phone records. I spent hours arranging them like puzzle pieces, the story of my family written in numbers and lies. The deeper I went, the more patterns I saw. Transfers labeled consulting fees that matched my deposits to his account. Utility bills listed under my name for a house I hadn't lived in for 5 years. And worst of all, a second credit card opened with my Social Security number. I traced it back through the statements, restaurant charges, hotel bookings, spa treatments, Claire's signature at a luxury resort in Aspen. My father hadn't acted alone. Claire had been using it too. That realization hurt more than the slap. My father's cruelty was expected. It was the language he spoke. But Claire's betrayal that was personal. We had shared a bedroom, secrets, dreams. She used to braid my hair before school and whisper, "One day we'll get out of this house." I believed her. Now I saw that she had never wanted to get out. She just wanted the house for herself. I created folders labeled Fraudulent Accounts Forged Documents Claire's Expenses. The evidence was damning. Each file I saved was a piece of my past being rewritten in the language of truth. Still, every night before I went to sleep, a voice in my head whispered, "You're destroying your family." Another voice answered, "They destroyed you first." On Friday, I met with Mia again. Her office lights cast long shadows on the floor as I laid the documents across her desk. "This is enough to bring legal action," she said, scanning through them. "You have identity theft, credit fraud, embezzlement, and false documentation." "You could press charges, Lydia." I hesitated. "He's my father. He stopped being your father the moment he used your name to steal from you," she said quietly. "You're not ruining your family. You're saving yourself." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the city below. Every light in the skyline looked like someone else's story bright contained untouchable. I thought about all the times I had dimmed myself to keep our family peace. I thought about how they thrived on my silence. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The next morning, I called an attorney. His name was Adam Reyes, mid-40s, calm, methodical, the kind of man who didn't waste words. After I explained everything, he leaned back in his chair. "You have a strong case," he said. "But if we file, this will go public. Are you ready for that?" I looked at him, the question echoing in my chest. Was I ready? No, but I was done hiding. "Yes," I said. "Let's do it." We spent the next week preparing. I signed affidavits, provided statements, verified signatures. Each document was like a mirror held up to the past, and every reflection showed me a woman who refused to disappear. The last step was the police report. I stood in the precinct lobby, the smell of stale coffee and paper thick in the air, holding the folder against my chest. When the officer took it, I felt something inside me release a chain, snapping a weight, shifting. On my way out, I stopped at a red light and looked at my reflection in the car window. My cheek was healing, the bruise fading into a faint shadow, but my eyes looked different, steady focused. I whispered, "He took my name. Now, I'll make sure everyone knows what he did with it." As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "What did you do?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She already knew. By the time the police contacted my father, I already knew the storm was coming. The first call came from my mother. Her voice was trembling but sharp, a tone I knew too well. "Lydia, what have you done? The police came to the office. Do you want to destroy your father's life?" I took a deep breath. "No, Mom. He did that himself." "Don't you talk to me like that," she snapped. "He's your father. Everything he's done for this family." I closed my eyes, pressing my hand to my forehead. "You mean everything he's done to this family? To me? You're being dramatic again," she hissed. "You've always twisted things to make yourself the victim. Gaslighting." The word echoed like a diagnosis. I had spent years believing her version of the truth, but not this time. "Mom," I said quietly, "I have documents, witnesses, bank records. They're not opinions. They're facts." The silence that followed was heavy like static before a lightning strike. Then she whispered, "You don't know what you've started." I hung up. 10 minutes later, Claire called. No greeting, no hesitation. "You've lost your mind," she said. "Do you realize what this will do to Dad's business? To my career?" I let her talk. She always talked. "You're jealous," she spat. "You've always been jealous. You couldn't stand being in my shadow, so you decided to burn the whole family down." I laughed low and bitter. "Claire, I'm not burning it down. I'm just showing people what it's made of." "You ungrateful!" She stopped when she heard herself realizing the script was too familiar. "You're going to regret this." Maybe I said, but at least I'll regret something honest. That night, my father finally called. His voice was calm, measured the way predators sound before they strike. "You think you can ruin me with your little file," he said. "You've embarrassed me, Lydia. You've embarrassed your family. Do you have any idea how many people I know, how easily I can make you disappear in this city?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "You already made me disappear," I said. "I just decided to come back." "You don't have the guts to see this through," he sneered. "You never did." I smiled faintly. Then you'll finally get to see what happens when I stop trying to please you." He hung up, but not before I heard him slam something glass, shattering his fury echoing down the line. The next day, social media started buzzing. Local news outlets picked up the story, "Denver business owner under investigation for financial fraud and identity theft." His company's logo flashed across the screen, followed by his picture and then mine side by side. My mother's friends began calling her. Claire's law firm issued a statement distancing her from the case. I didn't post anything. I didn't have to. The truth was already doing its work. By evening, my inbox was full reporters, old acquaintances, even former employees of my father's company who wanted to share their own stories. For years, people had feared him. Now they smelled weakness. One email stopped me cold. It was from a woman named Judith, my father's former secretary. She wrote, "I've been waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to him. He made everyone sign NDAs, but I kept copies. If you need testimony, I'm with you." I sat back staring at the screen. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my fight. It was a reckoning for everyone he'd crushed beneath his control. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my window. The city lights shimmered through the drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed sharp, persistent, unstoppable. I whispered, "Let it burn." The story spread faster than I ever imagined. By the end of the week, every local station had picked it up and a few national outlets were circling. The headline that broke him was simple: "Richard Cross accused of defrauding daughter and using her identity for illegal loans." Beneath it, my face stared back at me, not broken, not hidden, but steady composed. My attorney had advised me to stay quiet publicly, but the silence was deafening. People were writing their own versions of my story, painting me as a vengeful daughter, a liar, a gold digger, or a hero. So I decided to tell the truth myself. I wrote a short post on my professional design account. "This isn't about revenge. It's about boundaries." For years, I was told love meant sacrifice. It doesn't. Love without respect isn't love, it's control. I'm just reclaiming my name. It went viral overnight. Thousands of comments poured in. Some called me brave. Some told me to forgive. But most said the same thing: "I've lived this too." I hadn't realized how many invisible daughters there were in the world until that post. The next morning, I walked into my office at the design firm and froze. My coworkers stood and started clapping. I wanted to sink through the floor. My boss, a quiet woman named Erin, hugged me. "You did something most people never do," she said. "You stood up to a monster." It felt surreal validation from strangers, but still no apology from home. My father vanished from the office for several days. When he finally surfaced, it was through a video that someone leaked online, him pacing his study, shouting at reporters through the gate. "My daughter's mentally unstable," he yelled. "She's being manipulated by lawyers and liars. None of this is true." The video cut off mid-rant, but it didn't matter. His calm, commanding image, the one he'd built for decades, shattered in 2 minutes of rage. My mother tried to call again. I ignored her first 4 attempts, but the 5th came with a voicemail. Her voice was smaller this time, tired. "Lydia, they're freezing our accounts. The police took his computer. Claire's firm suspended her. Please, just stop this." "You've made your point." I listened twice. The first time with pity, the second time with clarity. "You've made your point," as if truth was a tantrum, not justice. I saved the message not out of spite, but proof of how deep denial can run. My lawyer called that afternoon. "They're offering a settlement," he said. "Full restitution plus damages if you withdraw the criminal complaint." I stared out the window. The rain had stopped. The sky over Denver was pale and open, like a page waiting to be written on. "No," I said. "We're not negotiating truth." He nodded. "Then you'll have your day in court." The trial date was set for spring. For weeks, my father's world collapsed in slow motion. Suppliers cut ties. His company accounts were frozen. Claire's firm placed her on probation pending investigation. My mother's friends stopped answering her calls. The empire of fear he'd built began to crumble brick by brick under the weight of evidence. One night, I stood outside the old Cross house watching from across the street. The lights were out except for one dim lamp in the window. For years, I had imagined standing on that porch again, begging to be seen. Now I only felt distance, clean, beautiful distance. I took out my phone, snapped a photo, and whispered, "Goodbye." The same house that once defined me was now just a backdrop to a story that no longer owned me. As I turned away, I realized the slap, the insults, the betrayal, they were all preludes to this moment. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to him. I was rewriting him out of my story. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, sterile, impersonal, the kind of place where truth becomes evidence. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my attorney beside me, my hands folded so tightly the knuckles whitened. Across the room, my father looked smaller than I remembered. The tailored suit didn't hide the fatigue around his eyes. My mother sat behind him, dressed in black, clutching a tissue like a relic. Claire wasn't there the first day. She sent a statement through her lawyer distancing herself from the forged accounts, though the records showed her signature. The trial began with opening statements. My lawyer spoke simply. This case is about trust and how one man used it to destroy the financial and emotional stability of his own daughter. My father's attorney painted me as a spoiled child seeking revenge. Miss Cross benefited from her father's generosity for years, he said. This is a family dispute, not a crime. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, but when my lawyer handed me the witness folder, I stood. My heels clicked softly against the tile as I took the stand. The bailiff swore me in. I looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide what my name meant after this. My voice was steady. My name is Lydia Cross, I said. I'm here because my father used my name, my credit, and my trust to fund his debt and his image. My lawyer guided me through the timeline, the payments, the forged loan, the evidence of the fake credit card. I explained each piece clearly like a presentation I'd been preparing for years. When he showed the copies of the forged documents, the courtroom murmured. The signature was identical to mine. I looked straight at my father. "You signed this," I said quietly. "You used me." His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. When his lawyer cross-examined me, he tried to twist it. "Isn't it true, Miss Cross, that your father paid your tuition? That he gave you your first job connection?" "Yes," I said, and then he made sure I would spend the rest of my life paying for it. A few people in the gallery nodded. The lawyer moved on, rattled. The next witness was Mia. She laid out the financial trail dates, transfer sums methodical and damning. Then came Judith, my father's former secretary. She broke the room's composure with her calm cutting testimony. "He made me notarize those papers," she said. "He told me Lydia had authorized it, but I knew she hadn't. I still have the emails." The defense objected. The judge overruled. My father's face drained of color. On the third day, Claire arrived. She looked immaculate pressed suit, perfect hair, but her eyes darted like someone trying to find the exit in a burning room. My lawyer called her to the stand. The questions were simple. Did you use the second credit card in your sister's name? Did you know your father forged her signature? Her answers were rehearsed. "I don't recall. I wasn't aware. I assumed it was authorized." Then my lawyer handed her the printouts of the Aspen Resort receipts. Her signature gleamed at the bottom of every page. She froze. "You signed these," he said, "and the account is registered under Lydia's Social Security number." The courtroom fell silent. For the first time, Claire looked at me. Really looked, and I saw it, guilt, cracking through her confidence like lightning through glass. She whispered, "Dad said it was fine." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough," he barked. The judge's gavel came down. "Mr. Cross, control yourself." The sound echoed through the room like a verdict. In that moment, every facade he'd ever built the proud patriarch, the businessman, the provider collapsed. He wasn't in control anymore. He was just a man exposed. When the session ended, I stood slowly, my body trembling not from fear, but release. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. Flashbulbs went off, voices shouted questions. I didn't answer any of them. I just said one sentence into the sea of microphones, "Abuse doesn't stop until someone refuses to be silent," and I walked away. The verdict came 2 weeks later. I didn't attend the final reading in person. My lawyer called me from the courthouse. His voice was calm, almost reverent. They found him guilty on all counts, he said. Fraud, identity theft, falsifying financial documents. He's facing up to 10 years. I stood by the window of my apartment staring out at the Denver skyline as the words sank in. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. "What about restitution?" I asked. "Full repayment of the $58,000, he said. "And damages for emotional and reputational harm. The judge said your evidence was impeccable." I almost laughed. Impeccable. That word used to belong to my sister, to my father, to the image of perfection they built on my back. Now it belonged to me, the invisible one, the quiet one. The truth was finally immaculate. The news exploded across every platform. Businessman Richard Cross, convicted of defrauding daughter. Former employees came forward sharing stories of unpaid wages and threats. His company collapsed within days. Contractors pulled out banks, froze his accounts, and his once-beloved brand became synonymous with corruption. Reporters camped outside the Cross estate snapping photos of my mother drawing the blinds. Claire resigned from her firm under personal circumstances. She deleted all her social media accounts, but the screenshots of her testimony circulated everywhere. She'd been the golden daughter. Now she was collateral damage in a story she helped write. My phone buzzed endlessly that week, journalists, old classmates, distant relatives. I ignored most of them, but one message caught my eye. It was from my mother. "We lost everything. He's been arrested. Please, Lydia, come home. We need to talk." I read it twice, then deleted it. Home. That house was never my home, it was a stage, and every act had ended in humiliation or silence. I wasn't going back to that theater. 2 days later, I saw the mugshot. My father's face unshaven and hollow, the arrogance gone. The headline beneath it read, "Richard Cross sentenced to 8 years for fraud and identity theft." I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness, like standing in a room after a storm hearing only your own heartbeat. My attorney invited me to a follow-up meeting, but I asked him to handle the details. The money didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the world finally saw him as he was. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city glow beneath me. The wind was cool, the kind that smells like rain and change. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who apologized for everything, who believed silence was love, who mistook pain for loyalty. She had died the night he slapped me at that table. The woman drinking wine under the stars had been born in her place. Still, a strange ache lingered, not regret grief. Grief for the years I gave away for the family I never really had. Justice doesn't heal you. It clears the ground so you can start rebuilding. I whispered into the night, "You can't hurt me anymore." Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, not threatening, but distant, fading. The Cross name was no longer a crown. It was a warning. The next morning, I opened my email to a message from a journalist asking for an exclusive interview. I typed my reply carefully. I don't have a story about revenge. I have a story about freedom. Then I closed my laptop and walked outside. Sunlight catching on the glass towers, each reflection a reminder that sometimes breaking is the only way light gets in. In the months after the trial, the world seemed quieter, as if the city itself was exhaling after holding its breath. I moved into a new apartment near the river, smaller than before, but full of light. The walls were white, the kind of blank canvas that begged for color for life. I bought secondhand furniture and plants that grew too fast for their pots. For the first time, every corner of the space belonged to me. No portraits on the wall. No ghosts. I started running again, just as I had when I was trying to survive him, but now every step felt like movement towards something instead of away. People began to recognize me. At coffee shops on the street. "You're the woman from the trial," they'd say. "You were brave." I'd smile, but inside, I always thought the same thing: I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Bravery is what people call survival after it stops looking messy. I started a blog, partly to write through the noise in my head, partly to make sense of what had happened. I called it The Cost of Silence. My first post went viral. I wrote about the invisible daughters, the financial hostages, the women who had been told to be grateful for crumbs. Comments poured in, thousands of them. Stories from women across the country, each beginning differently, but ending the same. I thought I was alone. I wasn't alone anymore. One morning, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. my mother's handwriting. Lydia, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that your father finally said your name in prison. He said you were right. I think that's the only truth left between us. Take care of yourself. I read it 3 times before setting it down. The words didn't bring comfort, they brought closure. For once, she wasn't defending him. That was enough. Claire didn't write, but I heard through mutual contacts that she'd moved out of state. Her law license was suspended for a year. I imagined her somewhere quiet, staring into the same kind of mirror I once had, wondering how everything went wrong. I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Living in someone else's shadow doesn't prepare you for the sunlight of truth. One night, I opened the old Project Truth folder on my laptop. The files were still there, the statements, screenshots, legal documents, all neatly archived. I hovered over the delete key for a long time. Then I closed the laptop instead. I wasn't ready to erase it. That file wasn't just proof of what they did. It was proof that I survived. I framed the red sheet of paper I had once taped to the wall, the one with "You owe me $58,000 written in thick marker. It hung above my desk not as anger, but as art, a relic of a version of me who refused to die quietly. 6 months after the verdict, I received an invitation to speak at a university event, Women and Financial Abuse Stories of Reclamation. I stood before a room of students, women in their 20s, who looked like me before everything broke. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. Abuse doesn't always come with bruises, I told them. Sometimes it comes with invoices. Sometimes it comes dressed as family. But the moment you decide to stop apologizing for your pain, you start to heal. When the applause ended, one student came up to me, tears in her eyes. I called my bank this morning, she said. I stopped a transfer to my mom's account. I just couldn't do it anymore. I smiled and said, "That's not rebellion. That's self-respect." As she walked away, I felt a strange warmth in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Maybe justice wasn't about punishment. Maybe it was about permission to live, to breathe, to exist without guilt. And I was finally giving it to myself. A year later, the story had stopped being a headline. The news cycle moved on to fresher scandals, louder dramas, new villains to dissect. My name no longer trended, and for the first time, that felt like peace. I wasn't the daughter who exposed her father anymore. I was just Lydia Cross, a designer, a woman, a survivor, rebuilding her life one quiet morning at a time. The seasons turned, and with them I changed too. My new firm grew slowly but steadily. Clients came not because of the notoriety, but because they liked my work. My eye for balance, for symmetry, for making broken spaces feel whole again. Maybe it was ironic that I built a career around restoration after spending half my life surrounded by emotional ruin. But perhaps that's what healing really is, designing beauty from damage. One afternoon in spring, I received a letter from the Department of Corrections. It wasn't from my father directly, but from a counselor on his behalf. Mr. Richard Cross wishes to inform you that he has enrolled in a rehabilitation program and hopes to make amends. He understands if you do not wish to respond. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into a drawer. There were no tears, no fury, no satisfaction, just a calm certainty that his journey no longer intersected with mine. You can't rebuild trust from the same foundation that cracked it. A few weeks later, I drove past the old Cross house. The windows were dark, the yard overgrown, a for sale sign leaning crooked in the dirt. The empire had rotted from the inside out. I parked across the street for a moment, staring at the ghost of my childhood. For years, I'd imagined coming back here in triumph, demanding recognition, proving I'd been right all along. But standing there, I realized I didn't need it. Some victories are loud, public, filled with applause. Others are quiet, a single breath of freedom after a lifetime of suffocation. Mine was the latter. I drove away without looking back. That evening, I hosted a dinner at my apartment, just a few close friends, candles, homemade food. Laughter. The clinking of glasses, the smell of roasted herbs, the hum of conversation. It was everything those old family dinners had never been: safe, warm, real. Mia leaned across the table, smiling. "You realize this is your anniversary," she said. 1 year since the trial ended. I nodded. "Feels like a lifetime ago." "You ever think about forgiveness?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. The question didn't sting anymore. Forgiveness, I said slowly, isn't about letting them back in. It's about not letting them live in my head, rent-free. She laughed softly. So, you've evicted them. I smiled. Completely. Later that night, after everyone left, I stepped out onto the balcony with a glass of wine, Pinot Noir my favorite. The city shimmered below the river, catching the last traces of sunset. I took a deep breath and it felt clean, unborrowed. I thought about all the versions of myself I had been: the obedient daughter, the silent provider, the woman begging for approval, and how each one had built a bridge to this moment. I whispered, "Thank you," not to them, but to her, the girl who finally said enough. My phone buzzed with a new email notification. It was from a publishing house. "We read your blog, The Cost of Silence. Would you be interested in turning your story into a book?" I laughed softly into the wind. Maybe I thought some stories deserved to live longer than their pain. I looked out at the skyline, the lights flickering like a balanced spreadsheet of the universe. I raised my glass to the night and said, "Walking away isn't losing, it's how you win." And for the first time, I truly believed it.